When I was still a student brother going through our formation program, someone once asked my mother about the different stages of progress. When talking about the habit, she was asked, "When does he get the brown one?" The answer is, of course, that he doesn't. Hello, my name is Father Ambrose Little, and welcome to Aquinas 101 Big Questions, Little Answers, the series where I do my best to answer your big questions about philosophy, theology, and more. We have received more questions about the habit, so I thought this month would be a good time to take up the topic once again. One viewer asks, has the Dominican habit suffered through the ages any changes, and why? The little answer to this question is that the Dominican habit has undergone surprisingly little change through the centuries. It is important to remember that before he founded the Order of Preachers, St. Dominic was what we call a canon regular of the Diocese of Osma. That basically means he was a monk who lived at the cathedral. Father Guy Bidwell, a modern biographer of St. Dominic, tells us that he never really altered his habit after founding the order. Already as a canon regular, he wore a white tunic, leather belt, capuce, and a black kappa. Apparently, the brethren in Narbonne wore a surplice as well, as was the custom of the canons regular in that region. But our early histories tell us that one of St. Dominic's early followers, Blessed Reginald of Orleans, was given the scapular by Mary herself, and so that replaced the surplice that some of the brethren wore in the early days. The rosary was a later addition. According to Father Augustine Thompson, it was not legislated as part of the Dominican habit until 1924, when the constitutions of the order were updated in light of the 1917 Code of Canon Law. However, it had been a universal custom of Dominicans for centuries to wear the rosary as part of the habit, since it was entrusted to us by Our Lady herself. It seems likely that the earliest development of this custom came about sometime in the late 15th century. One notable change did occur in 1968, when the constitutions of the order were revised in light of Vatican II. Before that time, our cooperator brothers, or the non-ordained Dominicans, used to wear a black scapular and capuce rather than white ones. That is why, for instance, St. Martin de Porres is depicted with a black scapular and capuce rather than a white scapular and capuce, since that was the habit of the brothers at the time in which he lived. In 1968, this was changed, so that there was no visible distinction between the cooperator brothers of the order and the priests of the order. Other than the addition of the Holy Rosary to the habit and the change in the brothers' habit, no other significant changes were made to the Dominican habit through the centuries. There were minor changes of fabric and the way the pieces of the habit would be cut, but the basic features of the habit have remained stable from the beginning. So that's about it for the habit and its changes through the centuries. The same viewer asks another habit-related question. He says, why does your capuce look different from other capuces? For example, look at the capuce of a Dominican and the capuce of a Franciscan. The capuce of a Dominican is less rigid and flowy, while the capuce of the Franciscans I know is rigid, and the hood is conical of shape. This is a hard question to answer, because I suspect that there are a variety of reasons for these differences, some being accidents of history, and others being matters of taste. With the Dominican capuce, all the examples of the early habits and images of the friars that we have indicate that it was always rounded and not pointed like the hoods of some other religious orders. It may be the case that this just was the style of capuce that St. Dominic had as a canon regular, and that is why ours is styled in that manner. Someone once told me that a rounded hood was more practical for actual use on the road. That has always seemed like a plausible reason to me, but it is purely conjectural. As to the Franciscan capuce and its shape, let me begin with a joke. People say that despite God's omniscience, there are three things that he doesn't know. 1, what a Dominican is saying when he preaches at Mass. 2, how much money the Jesuits have. And 3, how many kinds of Franciscans there are. The reason why I bring up this joke is to point out that there are many different branches of the Franciscan order, and these many divisions and reforms through the centuries have given them opportunities to change the habit so that each branch is visually distinct from one another. While I'm unsure as to the precise reason for each individual style, it seems likely to me that the stylized hoods are partially due to the different developments of Franciscan life through the ages. However, it is also the case that the images of St. Francis's habit include a hood with a point. Why his habit had a pointed hood rather than a rounded hood like ours, I can't tell you. For a more precise answer, I'm going to have to send you to a Franciscan historian. Well, that's all I have for you today. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Big Questions, Little Answers. I look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, may God bless you and keep you in His grace. I hope that answers all your questions, but if not, please let us know by submitting your big questions using hashtag AskAFriar in the YouTube comments and on social media. And don't forget to like and share with your friends, because it matters what you think.